Hello everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the County Seat. There was a recent op-ed in the Salt Lake Tribune talking about centrally assessed taxes and how they related it to a story where your neighbor goes and he gets a break on his property tax, but to make sure the county gets enough money, they charge you more on yours. Well, with a lot of big centrally located companies like airlines, railroads, utilities, that's a reality, and that's how the system works. That's our topic today on the County Seat. We're going to start by talking a little bit about centrally assessed taxes in general, so you can understand the mechanism and how it affects you.
Locally assessed taxpayers are those taxpayers within a county boundary that the county assessor has no problem determining the value of that property. A centrally assessed taxpayer crosses county boundaries, and so it's not easy for one single assessor to assess their value. The centrally assessed taxpayers are assessed by the tax commission.
The valuation on your real property is assessed using market value, or what similar homes are selling for in your area. With centrally assessed properties like railroads, airports, and power plants, it's not quite that simple.
It's hard to determine just how much that property is worth, so they use these other methods that are more tied to how well the company is performing in a more nebulous way. That makes it more of an art than a science.
That art of determining the value of such properties is rather hard because who can gauge what someone would pay for a railroad, for example? That fact often leads to companies disputing property tax claims as too high, which leads to further appeals. Now, while this may sound like a problem between the tax commission and the industry, this appeals process can actually have adverse effects on you.
The Utah Association of Counties noticed about years ago, decades ago, that these centrally assessed properties were seeing their values decrease over time or stay stagnant over time. And the result has been a property tax shift from centrally assessed to locally assessed. The counties are going to get the same amount of money no matter what based on truth in taxation. The county's concern was that the centrally assessed taxpayers were shifting their burden onto the locally assessed taxpayers, your homeowners and small business owners.
Let's say a new mining operation starts in your county. That infrastructure and the value of that industry create new tax dollars that can be collected by local governments. This is called new growth. The idea being that as this new entity will require additional county services, such as roads, over time the value of that industry will fluctuate with depreciation and fluctuations in the value of the resources that are being mined. Currently, when centrally assessed taxpayers challenge or appeal the value placed on their property by the Utah State Tax Commission, the county governments can then challenge that appeal. They do so on behalf of the other property owners in the county who will be affected by the change. Now, there's currently a proposal headed to the legislature that would restrict the county's ability to appeal those changes. And that legislation is the topic of this week's roundtable discussion. For the County Seat, I'm Terry Wood.
Thanks, Terry. Most of the current controversy swirls around an exemption or an automatic discount given to airlines. With that information in hand, we'll pick up with our panel of experts on the County Seat in just a minute when we return.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls? Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River? No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
149 million years in the making, dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
Prepare to be demolished at the Joab County Fair in Nephi, Utah, August 7th through the 12th. Prepare for the extraordinary as we push the limits of excitement at one county fair that changes all the rules. Rodeos and demolition derbies are just the icebreakers and an event that makes teenagers face their fears in front of the crowd and takes robots and cupcakes to a whole new level. Think you know county fairs? Think again. August 7th through the 12th in Nephi, Utah. It's the Juab County Fair. Find out what makes us different.
If you're looking for gold at the end of the rainbow, you'll probably be disappointed, because in Paiute County, the only thing you'll find at the end of a rainy day is the promise of adventure. Highway 89 is your access point through Marysville and the historic trails of Bouillon Canyon. Find yourself in the mountains 1 minute and the desert the next as you follow in the footsteps of the pioneers. Whitewater raft, fish, hike, all within a few minutes of a comfortable bed and a warm meal. Find out why the world has made Paiute County its off-road destination. Paiute County, the place where the rainbow ends.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are discussing the centrally assessed property tax issue. If you've been following the papers or listening to the radio programs around the valley, this has been a subject the last couple of weeks, and we wanted to address it here on the county seat. Joining us for our conversation from the Utah Taxpayers Association, Billy Hesterman. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And we've got Kerry Gibson, Commissioner from Weber County, and we've got Lincoln Church from the Utah Association of Counties. So as I look at this situation, I kind of see that there are two issues that really are kind of at play here. One is the legislative exception for the airline industry, which we're currently dealing with. And the other one is a broader issue that I think is going to grow out of this, and I hear conversation about how counties are going to be able to be involved in this centrally assessed tax issue going forward. So that's where I want to start the conversation, and I just want to get the three different perspectives on where we are with the airline exemption.
Well, I think as we've seen it, this is aligning how Utah does taxation with other types of vehicles. When you purchase a car, you pay for the price that you pay taxes or pay a fee in the state of Utah based on what the price of the car is. Same thing with what we're trying to do with the airlines, is making sure that they pay what is the fair value for what they paid on that aircraft. And that's what the attempt is with the legislation.
So what's your take on that?
Well, the concern that we had is that I think the debate during the legislative session hinged on one thing, and that was how much of a discount you should give the airlines if they buy the planes in bulk. So if they were to buy one airline or one plane, how much is it worth versus buying them in bulk? The argument from the airlines and Delta was, hey, as we buy in bulk, there's roughly a 20% discount. Just embed that into our valuation, because if we were ever to sell, we would sell in bulk as well. Therefore, we should just get an automatic 20% discount on how we're being taxed in the state of Utah. From the county's perspective, we were concerned that that was creating a bright line that wasn't necessarily reflective of true market value. So that's why you see the lawsuit that Salt Lake County, joined with other counties, Weber County and others, have filed, is to really get at whether or not they should be given this embedded 20% reduction in value. Constitutionally in the state of Utah, we have to value things at fair market value, and that's going to be the rub in the lawsuit, is whether or not this meets that constitutional fair market valuation.
So from your perspective, Kerry, you're the one that gets the phone calls from constituents. Exactly. So what's your take on all of this?
Those are always fun phone calls to have, because the reality is, if we don't follow the language in the Constitution, which reads that a person or corporation pays a tax in proportion to the fair market value of his or her personal property. If we vary from that, then it becomes a tax shift for sure. And so if a corporation of any kind, whether it's an airline or anything else, reduces their tax burden, then that burden is shifted to someone else. So we talk about the 20% number. That becomes the challenge, because especially in a large corporation or a large industry, if we carve out an exception like this, that really means that somebody is going to pick up that 20% somewhere on the other side. And generally speaking, from my perspective, it turns out to be individual taxpayers, homeowners, property owners of some kind that are assessed on their personal property at home. And so that number can be extremely large, especially in counties like Weber and others where there are a lot of centrally assessed taxpayers. And so again, it's really about everyone being held to the same standard and being responsible for their proportional share. and not having anyone be treated differently under the Constitution.
What kind of surprises me is that while the counties responded to this, I'm surprised like the railroads and Rocky Mountain Power and some of the other centrally assessed guys didn't do that. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think everyone's concerned. Everyone wants to make sure the taxpayers are all treated equally and that they all have that same standard of fair market value being placed on them. And that's what this is really all about. I couldn't agree more with. We want everyone treated the same way. And that's what we believe is happening. The legislature has now set something in place so that they're being treated the same as other taxpayers are being treated, and everyone's paying their fair share. If that's being changed, then there needs to be a conversation. But we believe we've found a place that is the appropriate standard to be going after.
Well, just understand, on centrally assessed, just so the viewers understand the distinction, there's locally assessed property and centrally assessed. Centrally assessed property is the property that crosses either county lines or state lines. And so what you're trying to do is take something that has a unitary value that spans several jurisdictions and try and get that down to what's called the apportion value. So you can apportion out to each county as to what their value is going to be. So lot of discussions. There's approximately 72 appeals just this year alone based on valuations in centrally assessed.
And that's a good place to take a break, because that's what I want to talk about when we come back. You're watching the County Seat on centrally assessed taxes. We'll be back in just a minute.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
Look south to beauty. Look south to San Juan County. Out here, the road goes on forever, and what you'll find will change how you see the world. Climb on your OHV and discover forgotten landscapes and vistas that challenge the imagination. From Blanding and Monticello to the cliff faces of Monument Valley, we're open and ready for you to explore. San Juan County, Utah's Canyon Country. Have you ever wanted to recreate the world around you? Add some excitement, culture, adventure? Well, there's no need to remake the world when that perfect combination already exists. Just remember 4 words. Welcome to Weber County. In Ogden, you'll find everything you're looking for, from the top of Powder Mountain to the restaurants of our revitalized downtown. Ogden, Utah. Mountain to metro and everything in between. Visit Ogden.com. Too often we find ourselves in shoes like these, or these. Wouldn't it be nice to change into something more like this, or this? How about these? Put on whatever shoes you prefer and come to Beaver County. We have exactly the adventure you need to put under them. So the next time you want to change out of these, come to Beaver County, where you can jump into a pair of these. Beaver County, Utah. Lace up for adventure.
Welcome back to the County Seat. We are talking today about centrally assessed taxes, some of the issues that have come up in the newspaper. Lincoln, you kind of set this up. I couldn't have asked for a better setup. Part of what we really wanted to talk about today is the fact that the appeal process to this point, when the tax commission has made a tax adjustment or has made some kind of property concession, there's always been an appeals process, and the counties have been able to be part of the appeal and as to whether the taxation for that year is fair or not. But it sounds like this is going to become an issue where they might get removed more from that process. And that, I think, is an important discussion.
Well, and it's been kind of a slow erosion as to what the county's role is in centrally assessed appeals. In 2015, there was a piece of legislation ran that essentially said that the county could not initiate an appeal. So if there was a valuation that was determined and brought to the tax commission, the county could not appeal that valuation unless they could demonstrate there was a 50% deviation in value associated with the appeal. So essentially, they were going to have to say that the tax commission was off by 50% in order for us to initiate the appeal. Surprise, surprise, that means that the county, since that legislation has passed, have filed 2 appeals in the last 2 years, because fundamentally, the likelihood of the tax commission being off by 50% is pretty slim. But what happens to those valuation changes that are in the 20 or 30% range? It also means we're not filing appeals on those, and those shifts could be occurring without the county intervening in an appeal. Where you are seeing counties is doing cross appeals. So when a taxpayer comes in and says the tax commission got it wrong, they valued us too high, and they appeal their value, then a county can intervene in those appeals in what's called a cross appeal. This year there are 40 cross appeals that have been filed by counties, but again, those aren't county initiated. That's just the county responding to a taxpayer saying
So they have to wait for an opening.
Correct.
What's your take on this?
Well, I think we have to remember a couple of things in this issue. Utah is actually unique in this. Many states don't allow counties to have any voice in the appeals process. So the fact that there is even an opportunity for them to have a door opening available to them, that's something that is already in place, and that's something I think the county should appreciate. The next thing is when the taxpayers actually go forward with an appeal, they have to do this at a significant cost to them. They aren't just looking at it and saying, you know, this is off by maybe 1 or 2%. They're looking at it and saying, we're going to have to put lawyers, accountants, experts, put some resources into this that's going to take a significant amount of time and a significant amount of money to go through this process and put our valuation of what we think is right. The taxpayers are only going through this if they think they have an opportunity to win. They're not just doing this willy-nilly or doing it to bug the counties. They're doing it because they believe they're being overcharged. And there's been a history to say that they're right. The taxpayers are right that they have been overassessed. They win more of these cases more often than they lose them. And they have every right to do this. And the counties still do have that chance to have their voice if the appeal process has begun, as Lincoln's already explained.
And the unique thing about Utah, and the reason we are different from other states, is because in Utah it's an embedded tax shift. In other states, if there's a change in the valuation, that does not automatically transfer the burden to others. So when we use the comparisons to other states, what is often lost is this inherent tax shift that happens to all other taxpayers, essentially when there's a break given to the...
And remember, I appreciate that distinction, because the reality is we want to get it right for Utah, and there's a lot of different circumstances in other states. But here's the challenge that I hope people remember. When counties get involved in these appeals, it's not because the county stands to gain anything. We're not representing the county itself, because we receive the same amount of money as part. It's just who pays. And so I think it makes perfect sense for a locally elected official. You've said it a million times at the beginning of your show, where the rubber meets the road or where things really happen. It's the county level where commissioners and council members are elected at this local level of government to represent people. And so it's a matter of what is fair for all of those people within our community. And I'm a pro-business individual, commissioner. I've been in the state legislature. I don't want anybody paying more in property tax than they should pay. Certainly understand the importance of an airline industry maybe having a hub in our state. That's important, and we need to treat that with kid gloves, because that is a big deal to us. But it's also very important for us to get it right. And I can't really think of anybody that has more interest in getting it right than a locally elected official that represents everyone in those counties.
But I think that also begs the question of why are they interested in getting it right? And I think the concern is, at least from the taxpayer, if they're a skeptic, are they concerned about getting it right because they want to make sure that their residents don't come get mad at them because they may have a higher tax bill the upcoming year? Or are they concerned about getting it right so that all the taxpayers are treated equally and fairly?
Well, that's a good question, Billy, but isn't part of that really tied to the fact that we have truth in taxation as a mechanism? And so if an airline comes in, I mean, it's a blessing and a curse. An airline comes in and says, we're going to put a hub in Utah, and we're going to put airplanes all the way across the state, and and run out of different places, and that's new business. Now you got new business, it ratchets things up, and then they start to devalue, and then all get shifted over to other property owners, because you got to have that budget the same in the county. So it seems to me like part of the problem is just the fact that we have this. We're getting the same amount of money, and it's either going to come from you or you. I mean, that kind of is how it's boiled down.
The one thing I will concede to Billy and the Taxpayers Association, historically, counties have not fared well in a lot of the appeals that they were filing. We've done pretty well on the cross appeals in terms of kind of finding that middle ground, but on the appeals we filed, we had not done well in the past. Because of that, the Association of Counties has actually changed our process, which is one of the positive outcomes, if you will, of the 2015 legislation, to really help counties coordinate, give them professional services so that they can be more robust in their analysis of whether or not they should file an appeal. So we do think some good things have come out of that. And like I've said, we want to make sure we're getting this right. This is not simply an interest in shifting the tax burden to our corporate citizens so that we can tell our constituents how great we are. And
along with that, back to the point that Billy made, Yeah, I can understand. We don't want these decisions being made on public clamor. That's, you know, they have to make sense, and I appreciate that perspective. But I will tell you this, it's also of equal concern for me to have a decision made that really has no accountability at the ballot box. And when they're made by the tax commission, that's a long ways removed, you know, from that accountability. And so at least having counties in a position where they can weigh in. I mean, we're not saying we need to make the decision. We understand that it's made by the tax commission. We're okay with that. But at least being able to weigh in is a really important thing, because there is a balance then between someone who really never hears public clamor, and there's a positive to that, and the folks who do have direct accountability to voters. I think it's a fine line, but it's important.
Well, I've got three brains out here that are pretty smart guys, and we don't have the entire machinery of the legislature around. If you had an ideal solution to find a good middle ground where everybody, you know, centrally assessed companies are saying, okay, this is good, and the counties are going, okay, this is good, what is it? How do you solve the problem?
I don't know if we're the ones that came with the problem, so maybe I would say that, you know, certainly we want to make sure everyone's treated fair and equal, and that government is getting what they need to provide the services that are essential for public good. But we also want to make sure that every taxpayer, regardless of whether it's you know, my mom and dad living in their house in Holiday, or a large mine, or an airline, or a railroad company, they're all being treated fair and equal and have the right assessed valuation given to them. And whatever we need to do to accomplish that, that's certainly something that we're in support of.
For us, the one big issue in the 2015 legislation was just the time that's allowed to be deliberative. The concern is we want everyone to be deliberative. The current process gives the county 30 days to go through and evaluate all appeals and determine whether or not they're going to file a counter appeal. 30 days is not very long when you're looking at very complicated tax returns on hundreds of jurisdictions that are filing centrally assessed appeals. So if we're looking for more deliberation to make sure that we get it right, I do think adding some time to that process to allow for that deliberation to occur is at least the first step in making sure we're getting this right.
Excellent. Well, we're going to stop here, take a quick break. We'll come back with a wrap-up of this conversation. This has been really good. You're watching The County Seat, folks.
There is a place where looking out means looking in, where an impression lasting only a few seconds will be imprinted on a life forever, where courage is forged and innocence rediscovered, where remembering is rewarding and forgetting unforgettable. There is a place where truth is felt and where seeing is believing. There is a place.
It's one more, here we go again. I tell myself I'm not enough, but one more time is not enough. One last kiss and then you were gone, and I'm here wishing you could stay a little longer. Stay a little longer. Wishing you could stay a little longer.
In a place that is beyond words, there is nothing to be said, except take your time in Bryce Canyon country.
Welcome back to The County Seat. We're talking about centrally assessed taxes. Obviously, my gut reaction is if this has this much conversation going on about it in the summer, that when the legislature comes back, this is going to get talked about.
That is the read we've been getting from lawmakers.
So what are you going to do? What do you guys want to do?
Well, like we've talked about before, we want to make sure every taxpayer is treated fair and that they have the right valuation. If there needs to be tweaks or adjustments made, maybe there's a conversation to be had. But at the same time, we do want to say that what we have now is pretty good and it's working really well. We think the taxpayers are really having a fair and equal treatment here in the state of Utah. And so to mess with it, hopefully we're only looking at it to do, a small sliver change and not something that we're going to regret later on.
Kerry, agree or disagree with that?
I agree with a lot of it. I think it's important that that we have as many parties involved here as possible, and specifically from my perspective, that the counties maintain a role in being able to watch out for constituencies within their jurisdiction. And I agree with the standpoint that I think we're all on the same page here. I just worry that we've seen the momentum go in a direction where counties have been a little bit pushed aside in the discussion, and we just need to make sure that there's a place there for lots of different voices. I think that's how you get the best result in the end and the best legislation.
I think we're all in the same place. We want fair market value. That's what everyone's really trying to drive towards. So that's good that we can all kind of agree on the basic principles of the system. I think everyone understands the importance of the property tax as it is a component to funding infrastructure and funding government in the state of Utah. The place I really want to start is on the deliberation side. If there is a current lack in the process, from my opinion, it's once appeals are filed, you have to very quickly decide whether or not you're going to appeal, which really pulls away from that ability to deliberate and figure out if you've gotten this right. So figuring out that window of time and figuring out the deliberative process would, I think, be the first step in trying to get this to a better place.
60 days, 90 days?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a day thing or if it's having a separate independent body that comes in and validates some of the findings. There's a whole host of ways in which you can look at deliberation. Maybe it is timing, maybe it's additional experts. UAC has been trying to provide those services to our members. Maybe there's a better way to be doing it than we're currently doing it.
The beautiful part about it is we are in the summer, we are talking about it. This is how the process works, and we'll get to a point in the legislative session where the discussion will be robust and we'll talk about it amongst ourselves. I trust the legislature to really look at this in a positive way and for everybody involved. And I think that we've seen good results, as Billy has said, from that body really tackling these tough issues, and I'm confident that we'll be in a good place.
As a last quick question, would any of you think that we should go backwards from truth and taxation to a different system where that budget isn't guaranteed in taxes?
As I look at other states, I feel like we've got the best system around in terms of removing some of the volatility in the property tax system to the end payer. So from that standpoint, I think it's a really good system to remove that volatility in the ebbs and flows of the economy.
Let's don't reinvent the wheel. If we're doing something right, let's do it.
I feel a little uncomfortable when I agree with them, but I do on this one.
Thank you all. Thank you for joining us. Remember, local government is where your life happens. Be involved, be part of the process. Share this with your friends on social media, and we'll see you next week on The County Seat.